Well, it all began this time a week ago, 7 days ago, exactly as when the President Ramaphosa had delivered his State of the Nation address. We all listened anxiously for various topics to be discussed, most notably, of course, electricity. And as it came out, a Minister of Electricity. The last 2 days before today, we've had the SONA debate. And then today, we've had the President coming back and reacting to what he's been hearing. We'll be unpacking what the President had to say in more detail in a moment. First of all, let's get comments from various MPs as they begin to make their way out of the National Assembly. Grabbing them for us, eNCA senior reporter Aviwe Mtila, still in Cape Town for us. Hello to you, Aviwe. So as you grab those MPs to talk to outside the doors, give us your sense as you find people to talk to.
Hello, Gareth, and the members of Parliament are actually coming out just moments after President Ramaphosa delivered his reply to some of the debates, of course, that were tearing into his State of the Nation address. He says, while there has been somewhat harsh criticism of the last 2 days of the 5 years in the prison, he said that these parliamentarians need to reflect honestly. While, yes, there have been crises that they've had to meet over the last 5 years, there have been some significant steps, says the President. For example, institutions such as SARS have been revived back to their glorious days, where he says they inherited a state that was essentially hollowed out and admits to some of those challenges. I'm going to try and get some of these members of Parliament and see, just to get their reaction. So Aviwe Mtila is from the Democratic Alliance. President admits to some of course, the crises that he's been met with, but says there have been steps that he's taken to ensure that, for example, institutions such as SARS have been reinstored.
I think that perhaps the President missed an opportunity here today. He missed an opportunity in his SONA, and I think he missed an opportunity here today. I think a number of people were unanimous in highlighting what are the crises of the country. He still had an opportunity to talk about cutting VAT on critical basic food products for families to cushion them against the cost of living. He still had an opportunity to really affirm what is going to be done in holding ministers who have been not performing against targets. He still again had an opportunity to talk to what this electricity minister is going to do and how that differs.
Isn't that, sorry to interject, but isn't that been clarified in terms of now the electricity? We know that they don't have a new plan. They'll follow up, accelerate the plan that was announced back in July, and then essentially the burden of load shedding will be dealt with by this particular minister.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the problem. The problem is that there's now 4 different ministers who are dealing with this crisis. One, we've got Copter Minister, who is the custodian of the state of disaster, and we've got the 2 ministers who are public enterprises and energy. And this now electricity minister that's going to be overseeing and coordinating this. The problem here, Aviwe, the problem that the President has is not the lack of people to occupy ministerial positions. What he has is the lack of political will and the lack of the ability to hold his ministers who don't perform to account.
Okay, thank you very much. Aviwe Mtila from the Democratic Alliance there, as we try to get more reaction. I just want to touch quickly with Willie Matisha from COPE to get your response. Thank you for joining us at eNCA. Yeah. Around, is it clear what the role of the Minister of Electricity is going to be, given that the President says that load shedding will be his mandate to restore power crisis, and of course there will be no new plan, but just the acceleration of that crisis plan that we heard back in July?
It's simply unfortunate. I mean, what SONA has become is that the President will come, give his particular speech, we come in, we give him advice, and he does not go on. But on this particular point, I indicated, for example, during the debate yesterday, that there is no crisis insofar as electricity is concerned. The SIU checked and found out that there are problems of stealing, of corruption, particularly by the employees of ESCOM. So the problems are there, the problems are known. Him appointing the minister is just a waste of time and money. It is not supposed to be like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Willie Matisha from COPE there. I want to get sense now from from the ANC, one of the communication leaders from the African National Congress.
I'm the deputy spokesperson.
Deputy spokesperson of the African National Congress. Is it clearer in terms of how soon we'll have the likes of the load shedding woes behind us here from what we heard the President's response here?
As the African National Congress, we think the President has clarified a number of issues. We know there are short, medium and long-term programs in relating to the proper functioning of ESCOM, but the immediate one is load shedding. Therefore, that minister, we understand that is not a long-term kind of a minister, not ministry. And it's important that that happens, the focus on getting load shedding. And the target of the ANC is that within a year, load shedding should, the heavy effects of load shedding or with an intention of defeating load shedding should happen within a year. That's what we announced at our Lekgotla. And we think the President's appointment is quite serious in terms of appointing the Minister of Electricity.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to move along now, see if we can get any more voices on the ground here. I'm actually spotting the Minister of Finance. I'm hoping he can give us a quick word, because you remember the President suggested that next week, Wednesday, on the 22nd of February, the Minister of Finance is to announce plans that will help the rollout of, we do understand, generators. Minister, it's just in mid-conversation, but I'm going to try grab Finance Minister Enoch. Just a quick one, Domkulu. We don't mean to disrupt you, but of course it's the budget speech next Wednesday. The President mentions that you'll be mentioning a number of interventions when it comes to the national state of disaster. Maybe give us insight on what to expect, Finance Minister.
I know. Try next door. you can't get anything about what I'm going to say in the budget. But what I can say is that there's synergy between the President and the Minister of Finance. So there's likely to be a follow-up on some of the things the President has highlighted. He has said we'll probably give in some indication on the numbers, which is fine. We are going to look into the speech and check how do we frame them.
You mentioned rooftop installations, of course, that will be coming from the budget that you are to announce next week.
I can't go into that detail. It's sufficient the information the President has said. It's not my duty to go to that detail. I'm mute for now until Wednesday next week.
Okay, not going into the budget itself, but there are those fears around what will happen once all this emergency money has been released, especially around the national state of disaster. You as the Finance Minister, do you assure that nothing will happen when it comes to the looting or stealing around?
We learn in every disaster and build on that and build checks and balances. And I think in the light of the experiences we've had, we will also beef up the checks and balances.
On that, okay, that's the Finance Minister Enoch Gondogwana. Of course, the man that is to deliver the budget, that is next week, Wednesday, on the 22nd of February. Of course, we heard there some suggestions that he'll be mentioning interventions when it comes to rooftop installation, both for businesses and for the ordinary South Africans on the ground. Some of what to expect ahead of the budget, and some of what, of course, we've heard also in the President's speech. I'm just going to look around and see if we can get any more voices on the ground. Gareth, I see there is the Mineral Resources Minister, Gweta Mantashe, hoping he'll be also able to give us a word. I'm going to come to him. Minister, thank you for joining us at eNCA. Maybe just more clarity. The President has spoken extensively about the national state of disaster, but your role as Mineral Resources Minister when it comes to this electricity crisis.
But it's not I'm not in a state of disaster. DMRE is not in a state of disaster.
Maybe clarification then on ESCOM and where it's going to go to, because last week the President mentioned it will remain with public enterprises, while the SG of the ANC suggested that it could go to your department in mineral resources.
No. I think as journalists you must do your research properly. ESCOM has always been in DPE, public enterprises, all the years. Actually, I never managed ESCOM in my life. Okay. If this SG talks of going to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, he is talking to an ANC conference resolution. That is a resolution which will have to take its own time, discussion, structured and all those things. At this point in time, ESCOM is in TPE, President is establishing a Minister of Electricity, and that's it.
And that's the clarification, I guess, a lot of South Africans want to know.
Yeah.
The role of the Minister of Electricity. I'm sure as Cabinet member, you've been extensively briefed on what he'll do.
We have been explaining this over and over. I don't know if you want us to repeat it over and over. I think President added clarification to what we've been saying about it. It is focusing on the crisis of load shedding. And I think it is a necessary intervention to try and resolve load shedding within a reasonable time.
Is there that time given, then, that timeline on when, how soon load shedding will be resolved?
First thing is that how soon will that minister be appointed? And my suggestion is that it should be as soon as possible and not waste time to form a big infrastructure, touch the ground running.
Okay, touch the ground running there.
Okay.
The Mineral Resources Minister, Kwete Mantashe, of course, suggesting that that crucial Minister of Electricity, which will be under presidency, must be appointed soon. It talks to some of what we heard towards the end there from President Cyril Ramaphosa as he sort of bid farewell to Deputy President David Mabuza, thanking him for all his assistance over the last 5 years and what the Deputy President has done. Also mentioning, of course, that the resignation has been handed in there by David Mabuza. He's considering it, but that suggests then that in coming days we can expect a cabinet reshuffle. I'm just going to look around once more, see who we can get on the ground, just to get reaction from the president's reply to, of course, what we've been hearing. Many opposition party leaders that have been tearing apart the State of the Nation address from the president. In fact, I see the Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Aaron Mutwaledi, a bit busy on the phone. I'm hoping I can interrupt him. Domkulu, just your sentiments. President has mentioned this Ministry of Electricity and the suggestion that it's no new plan, essentially. It's what we heard in July and just the acceleration of it. I want to get your sense maybe from a cabinet minister on what we expect going forward.
You insisted on this even yesterday. I said you must explain, wait for the president and hear it from the horse's mouth. And I'm sure you heard it from the horse's mouth. He has explained clearly why we need that ministry. And I think we have got an example not very far away. If you look at what happened during COVID, because the minister, every single minute of his life was taken over by COVID, which was true. Did you see what happened? The other programs, like the very biggest program of HIV/AIDS, started suffering. Things like immunization. Now we've got the measles, outbreak, etc. Because the concentration was on a disaster that COVID was. And I think that's what the president was saying, that this minister will wake up, breathe, talk, and eat load shedding, so that the others are involved in all the other things. I tend to understand him very well, because when I was in Limpopo as the MEs for Education, we had a huge shortage of classrooms. I hired an engineer who was at the level of DDG. DDGs hold meetings, talk about all sorts of issues, comply with all sorts of things. And he came to me and said, look, you want me to put up buildings, please release me from these others to attend a management meeting, talk about strategy and plans of other things and all that. Please allow me to sit and concentrate on building. And we did that, and within 3 years, we were able to build more schools than Public Works Department did in 12 years. But just by having one person whose everyday job is to concentrate on that. I found myself understanding it very deeply because I went through something like that.
And you've also been, of course, the health minister. So I'm hoping you'll be able to give us more clarity on the pronounced national health insurance. President suggesting that it's legislation, of course, and parliamentarians that are needed to give it the go-ahead. But maybe from your understanding, how soon can we see that NHI in place?
Well, look, I'm not in that area, so I wouldn't know exactly where Parliament. What I know is that that legislation has been driven for quite a long time. If I'm not mistaken, it's in Parliament. And we said all the time that when we implement NHI, it's not going to be an event where you say today, it's going to be a gradual implementation, whereupon eventually everybody in South Africa received good quality health services without having to pay at the point of care. That's what NHI means.
But what we don't seem to have a lot of clarity in is the issues around crime. I mean, it's quite brazen in its nature, and we're seeing it rampant almost on a daily basis in the country. But we're not getting what's going to be done about this, Minister.
Well, I belong to the Peace and Stability Committee and the JCPS cluster in government. We do talk about those things every day. One of the biggest problems, the JCPS cluster is justice, peace and crime prevention. That's what the cluster means. The Department of Justice, Home Affairs, Police, the Army, State Security, we all sit in that cluster. One of the things that happened, which obviously people could not see, was that over a protracted period of time, the budget has been shifted from that cluster towards social services when we're increasing the intake on social welfare, on education, on health. Money was being pushed over that side. During COVID, it was even worse. Remember, Home Affairs is part of the security of the country. 500 million rand was taken from Home Affairs at the go. From there, 150 million. Those budget cuts led to severe shortage of personnel, to an extent where in Home Affairs, we found ourselves at 39% of the staffing that we need. It's only now that we are correcting it. The police had more people 12 years ago. There were more policemen than there are now. That's why then the remedy was to put in 10,000 policemen, which have already been unveiled. This year, another 20,000 are going to be added, so that there is visibility of the police on our streets. They were not visible because there was a big shortage of them. So those are some of the things that are being done.
Okay, thank you very much. Home Affairs Minister Dr. Mtila, of course, on that crucial issue that looks at crime, really escalating levels, and you'd only need to look at the headlines that were part of 2022. If it's not the rape of women or the killing of children as well, it would be the mass shootings that we'd see time and again, a lot of them happening at taverns. If it's not that, it was the kidnappings. And of course, we've seen also those headlines continue this year, where a lot of prominent people, for example, the likes of your AKA DJ somebody, gunned down really brutalistly and quite, brazenly. So it's some of those suggestions that now they're adding 10,000 more boots on the ground, with another additional 10,000 coming in to enable that police visibility. I'm going to look around just one more time, Gareth, see if there is any more members of parliament that we can talk to, but it looks like a lot of them have left now. But of course, that follows that response from President Cyril Ramaphosa, admitting to some, the crises that he's had to face in government, but saying that there's also been a lot of achievement in the last 5 years.